And I will now turn things over to your speakers for the day, Clay Ross, Jayme Stone, and Lee Dene. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Willie. Thank you. We want to quickly just acknowledge APAP and thank APAP for everything that they do to make these connections with artists possible. It's really, really wonderful to be with you all today. Today, we're going to get into some really interesting and important topics for all of us who are releasing music, all of us who are trying to get our music out there, get attention for it, and make sure it reaches people. And we have a really, really cool opportunity to connect with Lee Dene, who is from 30 Tigers Records. And she does A&R at the label, wears other hats. And we're really, really honored that she could be with us today. Thanks, Lee. Thanks for joining us. And we'll hear a little bit more from Lee as we get into it. And so if you have any questions for a label executive, it's a good opportunity to ask those. And so now I'm going to turn it over to my partner in composer career, Jayme Stone, to lead us through this workshop.
Hey friends, good afternoon. I put a link in the chat to a worksheet that is really worth downloading. Can everybody see that? Excellent. And that'll also save you from taking notes on everything. There's a lot here. And I'm going to try and move through all of these things thoroughly, but without belaboring any of it, because most of it's fairly self-explanatory. And I would love to save as much time for your questions and some of the intricacies of releasing a record in 2024 that we're going to get into. So for starters, I'm going to talk about some of the technical things you're going to need in order to release a record. The first one is an ISRC code, and this is a 12-digit code that's basically a unique signature of the sound recording, like a digital fingerprint, and it allows you to track sales, streams, radio plays, credit, the composition's author, performer, label, UPC code, etc. It's an essential thing that every digital aggregator, distribution service, label, etc. Will need for a sound recording. And you can get someone else to make it for you, but you can also create them yourself. So if you go to the link usisrc.org, you can pay a one-time registration fee of $95, and then you will get a unique code and a system for spinning out variations for every track you release for the rest of your lifetime. And you only need to pay that $95 fee once. So if you are dealing with any company that wants to charge you a lot of money to be creating ISRC codes for you, please know that you don't need to be doing that. You can do it yourself. And if you plan to release several records independently, this is a great thing to be doing. And if you've been on a record label or you used to be with CD Baby, where they created an ISRC code for you, you'll need to register if you've never done that, and sort of create your own fingerprint moving forward. Number two, mechanicals. So you need to pay for a license to release songs that were written by other people. And also for sampling, if you sampled recordings, you're also going to need to get a license for that, except unlike mechanicals, if you are sampling, you actually need to get permission from the copyright owner, as opposed to a cover song where you don't need permission. Anyone can cover anyone else's music. And you can do all of that through Harry Fox. So you can go to harryfox.com, and that's the one-stop shop clearinghouse for most of your mechanical needs. Number three, distribution. So you cannot directly get your music on Spotify, Tidal, Apple Music, Amazon, etc. you need what's called an aggregator, which is, you know, a middleman, digital middleman, to make that happen. And there are many, many, many different companies. And for now, just to keep it simple, I'm going to recommend 3 of them. One is called Symphonic, and the links are all here in your worksheet. Another is DistroKid, and another is AWOL. And those kind of represent a range of services, and they have different pricing, and there are definitely pros and cons of each one. And it's worth doing a little bit of research, talking to your peers, getting recommendations. And at the same time, it's not rocket science, and most of them are doing similar things. And though there are differences, especially in pricing, that will affect you, for the most part, they're all going to do a perfectly adequate job of getting your music on the streaming services. And so it's not worth agonizing endlessly about, as I have seen many artists do. But just, you know, one of those decisions you could make in an hour after doing some research and investigation. I will say, in my experience, DistroKid does an excellent job. It's just, if you are doing collaborations, like if you're releasing singles with different guest artists and things, the way their pricing structure works, it gets quite expensive, and you end up paying, could be a sizable yearly fee if you are releasing a lot of different things under different collaborative artist names. That I found to be kind of a drawback, but other than that, they're excellent. And I haven't used Symphonic myself, but several people have recommended it highly to me. The next step up for some people with distribution is to actually go with a company that offers label services. And they will do distribution for you. In other words, you won't need to sign up with DistroKid or another such aggregator. And they will also do like a la carte release management. They could fulfill vinyl. They could help press CDs. They could help write a press kit. They could do some marketing. They could be in charge of Spotify ads. Some of these, or many of these things, you will actually pay for. So you are paying for a service. This is not signing with a record label that is doing these things on your behalf, you know, for your mutual benefit. This is very much a service-based, done for you kind of situation. And some of them are more and less boutique. Some of them have bigger and smaller operations. The ones that I recommended here, Free Dirt, like many record labels, Free Dirt has a record label side and then a label services side. And so what they do is, you know, they get so many artists pitching them, only a very small portion of them they're actually going to sign to their label. And so they ingeniously opened up basically their staff and their tools and their systems for artists to pay for a la carte to use. Free Dirt specializes in roots music, folk and acoustic music, etc. So if that's in your wheelhouse, you know, they might be a good fit. Virtual Label I have been working with for many years, and they are excellent. I've had a great experience with them, and there's a few others on this list, and I will say that label services generally you need to apply to. So they're curated. They won't be as highly curated as a record label, but you actually have to apply to work with them. And maybe this might be a good spot, Lee, to introduce you, and you can tell us a little bit about the work that 30 Tigers does that somewhat crosses over into label services, but isn't exactly a label services company.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here today. I guess we're sort of almost a hybrid of a label services mixed with more of a more sort of conventional, a typical label. We are considered a label services primarily because the sort of ethos behind our company is that we don't own the artist's masters. We don't own intellectual property. And what we offer is kind of a collection of services that mirrors what you would get in a label, in a more traditional label, but we do it in conjunction with our distributor, which is the Orchard, and we charge a fee that's sort of a little bit of an add-on fee for going straight to the Orchard, because in the same way that you could go directly to, you know, any of the aggregators that you've mentioned, the Orchard does the same thing, and the Orchard is a really big digital distributor that has I think a couple of hundred labels that they distribute, inclusive of the Sony labels, and also I believe they have their own sort of direct label as well. So so what we do, like our contract is basically like based on a distribution kind of a deal if you were going to go directly to the Orchard. But I sort of view it as almost a partnership, because what happens is we're almost like that middleman where you get the benefit of the Orchard's global distribution system, plus the services that we offer. And we don't do a la carte. And that's really the one thing that very much differentiates us from some of these other services that you've mentioned. When we sign a deal with an artist, we actually sign their label entity. We don't even sign directly to, you know, an artist doesn't sign directly to us. Everything that the artist's label does is the same, essentially the same thing that, you know, they collect. You're responsible for collecting mechanicals. None of that passes through us as a company. What we offer, you kind of don't hand pick and hand choose. We have marketing plans. You have a dedicated project manager. We have physical and indie retail. We have someone who handles manufacturing. We're not a manufacturer, but we help facilitate, and we have relationships with plants, so we hold capacity in advance for our artists. And then we have a dedicated kind of marketing team, and we also have people who handle social media and pitch to the DSPs. So if to sign with us, you would sort of you sort of get the benefit of all of that. You don't sort of pick and choose. And so if that's what you're looking for, but at the same time being able to own and control your own intellectual property and have essentially a label for yourself, that's sort of what differs. And you know, there are certain I would guess parameters to entry, and I don't know if you want to maybe talk about that a little bit later, in terms of, you know, the type of artists that we look for and how we, you know, go about that. But I think for now, just to sort of explain that we are, you know, we started as with the vision of giving artists an alternative to a traditional label, providing as many services as we can in-house, but while allowing the artists to own and control their own work. So hopefully that's a start, and we can dig into it a little more later.
That's great. Maybe I'll ask one follow-up question.
Sure.
Which is, what does marketing look like in the world of 30 Tigers? What kinds of marketing initiatives are you doing around a record release?
Well, that's a great question. And that's, you know, kind of an ever-evolving, there's an ever-evolving answer to that. I mean, certainly things like, you know, we handle co-op and consumer advertising. We handle marketing is really, you know, making connections with indie retail and telling that, you know, going to the stores and, you know, bringing posters and dropping off product. And we also, you know, certainly in terms of coordinating, we don't do press in-house, and I can explain why later, but coordinating with the artist's team, which would include a PR person, you know, essentially a manager or someone who's kind of running the label, a booking agent if they're a band that's going out on the road. We sort of coordinate all of those efforts, and then the services that we offer, like the artists and their team, sort of work through every different department to sort of create the marketing plan that serves the music. And, you know, we are not content creators, but we have someone who handles, you know, sort of social media and gives best practices of, you know, what kind of content are you looking for? What platforms do you like to use? What platforms can we suggest that you use more or that you use for the first time. It's a very coordinated effort within our company. And when an artist is getting ready to, launch a record, we sort of work through department by department to kind of come up with what that marketing plan is going to look like. And it definitely does not look the same for every artist, but we employ certain services in different, in different capacities based on what the music is asking for, I guess.
Right. Thank you, Lee.
Mhm.
So one of the last technical details that you'll need right off the top is a PRO. This is a performing rights organization, and they ensure that songwriters and publishers are paid for the use of their music and collect royalties on behalf of whoever owns the rights. If you're an independent artist, that's likely just going to be you. And they will also collect public performance royalties. So if a song's played, on satellite radio or in a venue or on a TV show or a commercial, those uses all need to get paid for. And so they are in charge of collecting. So ASCAP and BMI are the two most well-known ones in the US. CSAC is often used in Europe, though some people register here for various reasons. And SOCAN is the Canadian equivalent of ASCAP and BMI, though if you do sign up with SOCAN, you will choose a partner organization in the US, so you will still also register through ASCAP and BMI. And usually each PRO will collect worldwide. So they have partnership deals with PROs in other territories. So if your music is getting a lot of airplay in Finland, for instance, your chosen PRO will collect from the Finnish PRO and vice versa to be obtaining all those royalties. And so you'll want to register each song on your new album in advance of the release. Great. I'm going to start to go through an album release checklist, and we'll talk about all these various things. And again, Lee, Clay, feel free to chime in if we want to go a little deeper while we're on any of these topics. And yes, Rachel, we're going to get to mechanical licensing, collective, and sound exchange in just a moment. So number one, make a video. It can be extremely useful to have a performance video for at least one song, up to 3 songs or more if you can afford to. And this is one of the best investments. As you all probably know, videos are well loved and very well watched on social media, especially. And they also work really well as pitches to people you want to use to build your team, journalists, etc. And you can also get a lot of mileage out of the investment of making a video, which is to say, if you are planning a Kickstarter, you can do your series of videos and then use them as part of your Kickstarter, then reuse them as part of your launch, and even make a little EPK from this material. You could consider even filming while you're already in the studio. Sometimes while you have all the musicians there, everything's set up. There are many, many studios these days that have a dedicated video person and actually have a 2 or 3 camera shoot and audio all set up because people are doing this so often. And another possibility is to obviously make a more lip sync style arty music video, which is great for promoting the release. It's less ideal for booking gigs. And so sometimes a performance video can be something you can use to promote the record, as well as something you can use to pitch prospective presenters. Okay, number 2 is to get physical and plan your physical release, which is to say you're going to need to get a barcode, a UPC code. You're going to need to proofread your liner notes. I highly recommend actually physically printing out the artwork of your record. I have seen so many artists, approve a PDF. You might have caught all the spelling errors, but it turns out Some of the print is really hard to read. Some of the background conflicts with text. There are so many things. The margins look strange. Things are too close to a gutter, etc. It's really, really worth printing it up and getting a few eyes on it to see things that you've never seen. And also be mindful of manufacturing lead times before you set your release date. This is one of the biggest mistakes that artists make. I can't tell you the number of people that I've worked with who, you know, have been ambitious. They think, oh, well, I'll get it just in time. And they go out on tour, or they have their hometown CD release show and they don't have any product in hand because the lead times were too short. And again, especially if you're going to be sending out things for a press campaign, you're going to want to have physical copies in hand quite a long time before. And this is doubly true for vinyl. Vinyl takes a lot longer than CDs. So keep all that in mind. I know you're excited when your master gets done, but we're going to talk about this more. Longer lead times always benefit the artists and benefit the marketing and benefit whoever is on your team, publicity, marketing, whatever it is. More time is always going to be helpful. Number 3, a record release is a great time to update all your assets. So time to get new photos, to write a new album-centric bio that can be used as a press release for the album, to create a release and date-specific press release if you are doing tour dates. And I highly recommend making a single EPK on your website to pitch everybody. This could be done well in advance if you're trying to pitch a label or trying to pitch a label services company. If you have decided to do this on your own, then to pitch press yourself, or even to try and get a publicist on board, having an EPK that is like a landing page that has everything you need about the album. I don't think that SoundCloud offers good enough sound quality for me. It's quite bad, noticeably bad. I find it unlistenable. And it can be janky to have photos in a Dropbox, press release in a Google Drive, music on a SoundCloud. You want to put it all up on one landing page. Obviously, if your record's not out yet, it can be a hidden page. I wouldn't password protect it because nobody wants any barrier to making it extremely easy to access the information, but I would have a 1-paragraph bio, a few press quotes if you have them from previous releases. If you have bullet points that will be useful for sales, like, you know, if you charted or won awards for any previous work, or, you know, significant tour highlights, that kind of thing, but just a few bullet points. Contact links, and then a player where people can sample, you know, hopefully the whole record, but if you don't want to do that, at least 3 songs. And again, this is something that is really worth having, and you can use from 6 months before the album comes out all the way until after the album is out, to be sending people to something that you can curate. You can control what the artwork looks like, photos, everything. And you're not at the mercy of cobbling together a bunch of links to third-party sites. Great. Number 4 is get organized. You'll want to create a shareable assets folder on Dropbox. And though I just talked about having an EPK on your site, you also want to have, even if it's a duplicate, assets folder on Dropbox that has all your M4A files, cover art, horizontal and vertical press photos, a PDF. So essentially it's like a duplicate of what's going to be on this EPK. You could also make download links of all of these items on your EPK, or link to your Dropbox there, but that's just a nice thing. Great. Number 5 is you want to register copyrights in publishing. So add any new songs to your catalog, as I mentioned earlier, with your PRO. And then there's a few other organizations that collect different kinds of royalties. So Song Trust is one that collects royalties generated by compositions on behalf of songwriters and publishers. Okay, these are just for the compositions themselves, not for the master. Sound Exchange collects digital performance royalties generated by the master itself and whoever owns and performs on that master. So those are two different kinds of royalties. And then the Mechanical Licensing Collective, MLC, collects streaming royalties on behalf of the songwriters and composers. And Lee, feel free to chime in if there's some more nuance to the difference between those.
I would add, in my understanding, I think is that if you register, Song Trust is almost acting as like a publishing administrator. And if you did use Song Trust or a service like that, that they would register for the MLC on your behalf. So then you would not need to register for the MLC. So there are a lot more nuances to this, but Song Trust is a publishing administrator, and the MLC is like one of the direct ones that your administrator or you would register for if you are acting as your own administrator to collect your royalties.
Yeah,
Right.
and the MLC specifically collects the digital and some physical mechanical royalties. It's a newer organization that came out of the 2018 Music Modernization Act that was passed, and it's now sort of the sole or the main organization that actually sends out blanket licenses to the DSPs to collect those royalties. So it's a quite important component of potentially from a financial standpoint of an artist's financial picture, so whether you get that registration set up through a different organization or whether you do it directly, I think a lot of new artists coming onto the scene don't necessarily know about it. I find that that's the case, even artists I've worked with for quite some time, because it's relatively new. But they are the only organization that's tasked with now actually charging the DSPs for the benefit of the DSPs hosting the mechanicals, the songs on their sites.
I would like to ask you, Lee, with some of your artists, does 30 Tigers ever act as a publishing administrator? And if not, are there specific companies that you either recommend they use as publishing administrators?
Yeah, we don't. Again, kind of goes with the philosophy of our company that we don't believe in owning intellectual property, so we don't act as a publisher. We have certainly worked, and I worked really closely with a lot of the publishers of the artists that I work with. I think that that's a very personal choice as to who represents your songs in that way. We work with companies like Downtown, which do just sort of straight admin deals. I've worked a lot with Wixen Music, which is also primarily an admin company. But there are different services for different publishing companies, and even the majors, Universal Music, Warner Chappell, Sony Publishing, that probably tend to they may offer admin as well, but they most likely would offer co-publishing situations, which means they own a piece of the artist's intellectual property. They sort of share in the ownership of the copyright. So we, from a company standpoint, we don't have any preference as to where our artists choose to publish, or if they just want to self-publish. But I think that's also a very important part of the thought process of a new artist, as to once you're out there potentially selling and touring and making money, who is going to be that person that collects for you? Song Trust can do it, I think, song by song, or they can do a bigger deal with you. Most of the bigger companies tend to want to do a percentage-based admin deal, taking 10 or 15% of the money that is earned as a service fee, not unlike what we do on the master side. But then co-publishers, collect and invest in the artists in a very different way. And that's probably an entirely new panel that we could talk about that, the complexities of all of that. I don't know if that answers the question for now. So
No, that's, I mean, I don't know if you'd mind just some of those publishing administrators and other things that you mentioned, if you don't
in
mind
the
putting
chat.
the links in the chat, just so people can be aware of
Sure.
what these are, and just to get a better scope of. I put one in there that's called 1RPM, which is a company that a friend of mine named Eric Herman recently started to work for as an A&R.
Mhm.
And they're kind of they also do this kind of tailor-made. They have the long tail where they just kind of are a distributor for anyone can distribute their music through them, but they also do these kind of artist specific deals, and will go as far as to invest capital into artists, or just have sort of like profit sharing deals with artists. And they also do an publishing administration. They have a publishing administration arm inside of their company. So yeah, there are so many things like this kind of popping up, and different outlets for artists to use. But I think that the important message here is be aware that if you aren't assigning someone to help you collect that income, you need to make sure that you're signed up at the very least on the MLC and Sound Exchange. Would you say that's correct, Lee and Jayme?
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah. One thing I want to say here is, this workshop is very thorough. This worksheet, goes into a lot of detail. We want to give you all the information that you need to successfully launch your project. At the same time, it is not essential that you do all of these things. So if anybody is already feeling overwhelmed, if you're glazing over, if you're wondering whether all of these things are appropriate to whatever stage of career you are at, please know that you don't have to do all these things, right? We want you to know what they are, and you can pick and choose. Obviously, if you're savvy and you have the time and you're at a certain stage of your career, you're going to want to do as much of this as possible. But I do see people who are maybe releasing their first album, or they're just releasing a single, or they're only playing regionally, or only playing a small CD release in their hometown. It is not necessary to do every single one of these things. So just a reminder that you are still a human being and an artist first. And we want to give you the resources and the tools and the know-how to be your best advocate and do business as well as possible and make things financially viable, sound, and sustainable. And if you feel like you're spending all of your time doing this and you don't want to be, you are free. I just want to, as the one telling you that you could do all these things, I also want to say, and you don't have to.
And yeah, and can I add something really quickly to that? As we're talking about this, and I'm sorry, I didn't put the exact right addresses in the links, but also some of these companies do curate on the publishing side too. So where we're talking about a lot of different options and a lot of different publishing types of companies, so those options are not always the artists. Most publishing companies of the bigger nature are going to curate and take on artists and songwriters that they feel fit in with the ethos, or the financial structure of their company. There are, I think Song Trust, which is a great place to sort of start before we, going too far off into these other companies. Song Trust is one that you can sort of pay to use a service. So I think just even reinforcing the fact that some companies are, by invitation only, and most companies are curated is a good place to start, and supports your words that you don't have to do all of it. Some of it you can't do. So focusing on the things that you can do where there are choices and options is probably a better thing to, sort of start with, I would think.
Great, thank you. Okay, back to number 6, project details. You want to submit your project details to allmusic.com and Discogs. And this is just a way to make sure that proper credits for musicians that have played on it, co-producers, co-writers, engineers, etc., makes its way into the right spaces and stays with your music so people know the village that help make it happen. Number 7 is you are going to want to claim and update your streaming profiles. So unfortunately, there is not a central clearinghouse for all the DSPs. You are going to need to sign in or sign up for Spotify for Artists, Apple Music for Artists, Tidal for Artists, and Bandcamp, so that you can update your profile, your photo, update your bio when possible, and individually to each DSP, pitch singles for playlists. All of those need to get done in the dedicated portal that each DSP have. And so that can be a lot of work, but very useful. Number 8 is get prepared to promote. So you'll want to make spreadsheets for any relevant blogs, playlists, media outlets, etc. This, of course, is if you are not hiring a publicist. So if you have the budget to hire a publicist, you're going to want to shop around for a publicist that's in a price range that you can afford. The best way to do this research is to look at what your peers or people who are, maybe one stage up from you in their, notoriety, level of career, etc., and see who they're using, and find an appropriate publicist. Again, this is a very personal thing. There are lots of boutique publicists that will work really hard for an artist and might have a small roster. Just because a publicist will take you on that has a huge roster and has worked with really famous people does not necessarily mean you're going to get those results. Sometimes people spend an enormous amount of money on a publicity campaign, and you're one of many, 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 many on a roster. And so there can be reasons to go with a small publicist or a larger publicist, depending on what the project is. And if you're going to do it yourself, you're going to want to take quite a lot of lead time if you've never done this before to build those databases and know who it is that you're pitching: editors, journalists, freelancers, etc. I'll mention now that a lot of these kinds of things, marketing, publicity, getting organized, building databases, are things that Clay and I cover in our online course, Compose Your Career, which I'll share the link for in just a little bit. And so we won't go into them fully here, but that's very much what the course is oriented around. And Clay will share a little bit more towards the end. Okay, number 9 is you want to have a listening page. So you can use Bandcamp. Even in advance, you can have a private Bandcamp page that converts to a public page once the release date hits. You can also use SoundCloud, although I don't personally recommend it because of the sound quality. You can use YouTube, or you can create a private stream page on your website, back to this idea of having a dedicated EPK. But you want a place where you can quickly share your music with industry insiders, people you might partner with, tastemakers, so-and-so that you met at a music conference, or so-and-so's friend of a friend who, freelances for a local NPR station. You want a place where you can send everybody very, very simply. Great. Number 10 is you can pre-game your newsletters and social media posts. So you want to draft and schedule a series of email newsletters to go out to your fans about your project. You can tease the release in advance, highlight a track. Some people will, condense that lead up time, and other people will stretch it out. There are different strategies, but generally you want to whet people's appetite, give them a teaser, give them a taste of it, release singles to build momentum, and have several opportunities or kicks at the can with the press to get attention, rather than only pitching the release as a whole. Number 11 is get ready for any sync opportunities if that's something you're interested in doing. By sync, I mean getting your music in film, television, or advertising. So if you are planning on pitching your music for those kind of opportunities, disco.ac, again, the link is in the worksheet, is become the go-to industry standard for organizing and sharing your music with music supervisors, agents, film directors, etc. Again, it's another place to put your music, build a profile, etc. But it is the place that people use it. There's great, ways for supervisors to filter out and find things. There's really great metadata and tagging, etc. So if that's something that you are wanting to pursue, again, we won't get into all the details as we do in our Compose Your Career course, but that's definitely the place to have your music. You can also have your engineer create instrumental mixes or stems for each track, and this will be really useful. A lot of times, as you know, they might want your song in a certain scene, but the dialogue has to come in the middle of a verse, so they need to be able to pull the lead vocal out. And so, again, I wouldn't necessarily, unless you are already hooked up with a sync agency, and this is something that you have, a game plan around. I don't know that I would pay your engineer to do all that in advance, but certainly maybe one or two things, or at least to have that conversation with your engineer and get a price and a timeline for them. Were you to be requested to have an instrumental version of a track, could they do that for you? How long would it take? How much would they charge you to, make a new mix, etc. Great. Number 12, an album release is a really, really great time to rebrand and reboot your profile. So if it's been a long time since you've updated your website, if it's been a long time since you've written a new bio, if it's been a long time since you've kind of, reconfigured the way that you present and position yourself on social media, it can be both a good coordinated activity to do that in tandem with a record release and a really worthwhile use of the investment, right? So as you all know, it's a huge investment to make a record, to hire an artist or a designer to do an album cover, etc. While you're at it, it's often worth spending just a little bit more. For instance, every time I work with a designer on an album cover, I will also ask them to make banners for social media, highlight covers for Instagram, right? Those little circles underneath your main page. I will get them to make templates that I can use for the album announcement, for tour dates, individual tour dates, a list of many tour dates, all those things. Yes, you can do a lot of these things yourself. And also, while you're hiring someone and paying them whatever you're paying them to do your album launch, it's usually very economical to say, like, can I pay you an extra $300 or an extra $500 to also get a poster and a bunch of things that you can reuse? As you know, if you are on social media, there is an endless amount of material, content to share, right? You'll be sharing videos, announcements, teasers, tour dates, etc. And so to have all that stuff that is branded and coordinated with the album release and even email newsletters and all that stuff, that is what branding is, which is to say, your box that your iPhone comes in and the billboards that you see and the Apple Store itself, they all reflect the same brand identity, right? That white and gray, that simple Helvetica text, that openness, right? So whatever it is that you're telegraphing with your album art, you can do that across all the visual communication that you are creating and engaging in. online. Great, almost done this list here. It's a lot, I know. Number 13, set up a sharing link. There are services like Feature FM or Linkfire that will consolidate all your streaming links in one place, which is to say, if you are going to post on Facebook, hey, my new single is out, you know, you're not going to post 10 links to Spotify and Apple Music and Deezer and all these things every time you're posting something, right? Or if you have a link in your bio, check out my new album, you know, these link services will provide a kind of one-stop page where it will have all the different DSPs there, and then people can choose their own. Obviously, Spotify is generally the most popular, but lots of people like me use Tidal or other things. So that can be a handy thing to have. Number 14, legal. If you've never done it, an album release is a good time to take care of legal details, like registering a trademark for your band name, forming a corporate identity, you know, figuring out tax things. Again, while there's a big project, there's an opportunity to actually, you know, coordinate, do some things properly, take care of some business that you've been meaning to, or you've been ignoring, or you're now aware of because we're mentioning it. And then lastly, on this checklist, take note of the submission deadlines for awards like the Grammys and the Junos, Independent Music Awards, etc. Obviously, it's good to know yourself and where you're at and not spend too much attention on something that may be a long shot, but also just good to be aware if there are things to apply for. You know, it might make a difference in your strategy about when in the year you release your album, or is it going to be for this Grammy cycle or the next one? And just to be aware of when you're able to submit for these kinds of opportunities. Great. So, Lee or Clay, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's all that was great and helpful. And all of this is a resource for you now, everyone. And if you have any other questions about that, you know, we can try to get to them here, or, you know, you can always reach out to Jayme and I. Will leave our contact information in the chat. We really wanted to take, we have a little bit of time. We got about 30 minutes left on the call, and I really wanted to take this opportunity to sort of lean on Lee as a resource, because I know that a lot of us are, you know, we're independent artists. A lot of us have released albums, you know, we are releasing albums, we're releasing music, we're telling our story online, we're working, we're in the performing arts field, we're members of APAP, we're trying to get better gigs, we're trying to, all the levers of the machine are working together at the same time, we're trying to get everything going. And a lot of times we if we're independently releasing these albums and releasing our music, we think, oh, it'd be amazing to have a label partner, it'd be amazing to have teams. And I can say from my experience, I've had team label partners, and it not been a great fit, you know. And then, you know, and then I've also looked at other labels, and I've aspired to work with such labels, and maybe the timing wasn't right or the fit wasn't right. But I think it would be really cool to just hear from Lee from the perspective of 30 Tigers, which has been a very successful label in today's climate, especially in terms of being like a nimble label that is creating and shaping its own destiny in a very specific way. If Lee could tell us a little bit more about kind of what they're looking for, what have been some of your biggest success stories, and what are the kinds of things you're trying to model as you go into the future by, you know, vetting artists in a particular way, and what does that process look like for 30 Tigers?
That's a multi-layered question with
I know, it's so
layered answer. I'll do my best to
good luck.
get through some of it. Thank you. And please stop me if I go off on a tangent too far, because I know time is, you know, I want to be mindful of that. Well, I guess just to start with you know, 30 Tigers has been around for over 20 years. And the person who started the company, David Macias, started it as a very small, actually a service, a more a la carte service-based company. But his sort of reason for starting it, which I think I said before, was to give artists back then an opportunity to release music with you know, that wasn't just a major label or nothing, you know, and you know, 20 plus years ago there were far fewer choices on the independent world than there are now. And I don't know what the percentage of artists that are independent versus the percentage that are on labels, but as the industry has evolved, majors have become much more you know, sort of stringent about who they sign, what they're looking for, and have much more of sort of the big radio and global hit now. You know, maybe that is TikTok related more than even radio, because again, things have changed, but they're still looking at a much bigger type of an artist where there are you know, the barriers to entry are very specific in the majors. So I think as a result of that, so many other types of independent companies and services and labels that do licensing deals and ventures and partnerships have evolved in these past number of years that give artists a lot more choice. We started, you know, over 20 years ago. Our deal is pretty specific as to what we offer, and there are very specific reasons behind that. So we only kind of do one album in a 3-year distribution term contract. We don't sign, you know, majors tend to have options for many other albums. They're not the artist's option. And you have to be continuing to sell and stream and grow in a way so that the, you know, the most label partners want to continue with option 2 or option 3 or option 6, if that's even still a thing. It probably isn't. But we do one album at a time, a 3-year distribution based term. And what I mean by that is, like I said before, we partner with the Orchard for distribution. Any money that we advance, and we do give advances, is going to only be recouped from one revenue stream, and that's sales and consumption that goes through our distributor, the Orchard. So what that means is when the artists partner with us and have their own label, all of the other ancillary revenue streams, and Jayme, you mentioned all, you know, all of it. We talked about mechanicals, we've talked about possible sync income. There's, you know, touring revenue. There's you know, artist and label sound exchange, as well as PRO, performance rights income. So all of these different income streams that artists earn off of their intellectual property flow directly to the artist's label entity with us. We don't touch them, they don't pass through us, and we don't collect a service fee for you know, for on that income. But anything that is sold through the Orchard, streamed online, you know, through the DSPs, that's how we recoup. So that's actually one kind of skinny stream. And for the percentage that we you know, add on to the Orchard's distribution fee, generally speaking, we say that artists within our family earn about 80% of gross revenue, just to be, you know, 75%, I should say, maybe probably is more accurate. Now, 75% of gross revenue goes directly to the artist and does not pass through us. That 25% we share with the Orchard, essentially. So again, for that half of 25%, we provide all of the services in-house that we offer, all of the different departments to help sort of craft and execute the marketing plan with the artist. One thing I didn't mention before was radio promotion. We have in-house radio as well. And also in terms of how we work, depending on what the campaign requires, what we believe is sort of the vision to you know, set up the marketing, we also will sometimes hire and outsource additional voices, maybe an additional radio plugger independently, maybe an additional digital marketing team. That might factor into what our kind of vision is for the artist based on who that artist is, what their goals are, where they're, where we think we're going to have the most success with the campaign. And I've worked on a lot of different, with a lot of different artists, a lot of different campaigns, everything from like heritage artists like Bruce Hornsby and Bela Fleck, who I'm working with right now, to some new and developing artists. I have an artist, Lizzie No, independent singer-songwriter, who just put out a record in January, and she's done records independently as well. And I also worked with Corinne Bailey Ray on her most recent record, which is a really specific project, album project that was based off of inspiration from a relationship to a museum and that she had. So it wasn't like she was making a record that was sort of directed towards radio. It was not a very commercial record, but it's a really artistic, beautiful statement. And she's out touring right now, supporting that album, which is called Black Rainbows. And so every artist I've worked with, like the marketing setup looks really, really different. And so I guess I could, if there are specific questions about specific artists that I've been working on,
Yeah.
I can sort of talk about that. But I do want to, sort of say that just when you say what we look for, I'll sort of, let me finish. I guess I'll finish trying to answer your multi-layered question, because I'm sure that's what a lot of our audience is interested in. Like, oh, who do you sign? How do we get signed? What do you look for? Because we have a very specific business model, and because we only kind of recoup any advances from that one income stream, and it's pretty skinny in the grand scheme of if there's 100% revenue that an artist can earn, and we are able to collect from about 12.5% of that, that gives all, that's a very skinny split, I guess. And for that, we provide a really great amount of services. Because of that, kind of skill, we tend to sign artists that have a certain amount of sales or consumption coming into our deal, or that we believe have the ability to get there by some very specific drivers. Maybe it's a great touring fan base. Maybe it's, we're not a company that sort of makes decisions by what's happening on social media, but maybe there are drivers on social media that are helping to advance the success of a single, or that give us that opportunity to say, okay, we think we're gonna sell X amount of units, or we certainly never know how that's gonna pan out, but it does inform our ability to offer upfront advances. We tend to base any advances on what we think we're going to sell in the marketplace. We're not a company that gets into bidding wars and that necessarily takes on a huge amount of upfront risk. For example, a major label that's going to sign an artist based on, one platform or something hitting, doesn't know what that artist is going to sell. They might invest a lot more upfront money. We don't do that, specifically because we want the artist to be able to recoup quickly, as fast as possible, so that everything that comes in, both from our revenue stream that we collect from, but also from those direct revenue sources that the artist's label collects, allows the artist to be profitable much faster. Might be on a smaller scale than a major label, but it's faster, and it allows the artist to then build and take that revenue and build into their own label, build their own company, essentially. So we provide sort of some of those like back end services of what the artist's own label is sort of is working towards, if that makes sense.
I wonder, does 3 years always seem to be long enough? And is there something that happens in that 3 years? Like, what is the typical cycle? Like, let's say you're going to do the release. Like, what are some of the things that happen in that 3 years?
Well, it could be more than one record in that 3-year time too, and we would sort of do an amendment if there's an additional record that's going to come in, because we really only sort of set our sights on one album at a time for a campaign. Really depends on what the artist's kind of drivers are. A tour marketing, an artist that's really out there on the road, someone like Jason Isbell, who tours for months and months and months upon the release of an album. Maybe a cycle goes beyond 3 years. That number, and I wasn't involved in the deal modeling of how our deals kind of came to light, because that was predates my time with the company. But I think a 3-year cycle assumes that we are going to then hopefully be profitable to some extent, or at the very least break even with the investment that we've made, so that we can continue to, feed the resources of our company and provide really great services. But without taking such a heavy hit from the artist. We're not going to say, well, we haven't made enough money, so therefore we're going to take from this revenue stream and that, and we're going to add on. We just won't do that. So it does limit, or not limit, but maybe narrow the focus of the types of artists we work with. So maybe 3 years is sort of an arbitrary number. Most of the artists we work with stay with us, but we don't want artists to stay with us by necessity, because it's they're contractually obligated to do so. So I think 3 years gives that time and window and space to say, we've launched a campaign around an artist's album, they've toured, we've put out singles, we've helped market, we've directed efforts, through social media, through different outlets. We've given best practices on the type of content that the artists are going to create, but ultimately those are things that the artist decides to do, on their own, and maybe hires other, we don't have in-house art direction or in-house packaging design. We have lots of recommendations, and we have lots of different creative experts that we have worked with that we will recommend if needed. But oftentimes artists come with us having some of those, like, they're people they've worked with before and they'd like to work with them again. And we always work with whoever the artist's prior team may be. And we're happy to do so.
And I mean, you've already made it clear like how narrow the margins are for where you guys actually are able to profit and keep a business going. I mean, you're a company, you have multiple employees. It's not inexpensive to have this company, and you're putting sweat equity and lots of labor into these projects that you're working on, and paying people's salaries and so forth. And so I'm just wondering, sort of from the financial aspects of releasing an album, can you give us an idea of like the kind of sales threshold that artists need to meet, maybe the kind of how you're seeing that come through, whether it's through streaming or physical product, and then the kind of spend that you're doing for these artists?
Yeah, the range of spend is really hard to say, because a newer artist is very likely to get a much smaller advance, because we don't have that, we don't have that sort of sense of here's where their audience is and here's what they sold on their last 2 and 3 records. We might base an advance or a projection on looking at the history of the last album or two that the artist has released, and if there are sales that sort of fit. And again, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier. I never want to say that this is an absolute, because it's only one part of the criteria that we use to decide who we take on. But we generally have an entry point of an artist coming in with somewhere maybe in the 15,000 unit range, which is a big lift for a brand new artist. That's it's hard to know how to sell 15,000 units or consumption, equivalents. That's maybe a place I would say this is a comfort zone for us, because that presumes that there is an audience of some sort that the artist has built. There is some means for recouping that one small, revenue stream that, and allows us to give a little bit of an advance. In a perfect world, we would provide an advance that gets the artist to market, maybe that allows for, because like I said before, we don't do PR in-house. So maybe an advance that allows us to help fund a 4 to 6 month PR campaign, which can be kind of costly, especially for a developing artist, a new artist. Helps with a little bit of manufacturing. We're not manufacturers, but we will suggest a quantity of, while we're talking about a marketing campaign and where we're going to go with that. Does the artist want vinyl? Does the artist want to press a few CDs to sell at, to sell on site, to, for D2C, for us to be able to share with indie retail, and our indie retail relationships are a very important part of our business. So we do, if we're setting up an album and we're out there kind of trying to, champion for our artists, we're going to want to have some albums in stores and maybe some posters if that's something an artist makes, or some cards, you know, to sort of say, hey, we've got a new record, we've got a new artist we're really excited about. So that's sort of part and parcel with the marketing campaign to a certain degree, but those factor into the economics of an advance, because if we can, we would in theory want to be able to help cover the costs of some of those, you know, sort of first steps towards a release. After that, the artist is going to go out on the road, and our coordinated efforts generally do align with a tour plan. Most of our artists do come in having a manager and a booking agent and a tour plan, so that we can start coming up with a single release strategy and a campaign that may involve radio, may involve putting out some content, some visuals, and coordinate with a PR team. And if the artist doesn't have a PR team, we have, we work with so many, and we're always happy to make introductions. But having an agent and a manager is also pretty important for us. I won't say we never sign artists that don't have them, but we rarely do, I guess I can say.
Lee, can I just jump in and ask,
Sure.
that advance, is that entirely recoupable against sales?
Yes.
Against the artist's portion of the sales?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anything that kind of goes through, our distribution network with the orchard is considered sales or consumption. For those who don't know, sales is almost an antiquated term that refers to sort of specific physical units. Consumption is that combination of streaming and downloads, because streaming, streaming is renting music essentially. You can make libraries and playlists on your service if you're with Tidal or Spotify or Apple Music, but as soon as you quit that service, or whether it's a free service or a paid service, you get different relationships with that music, but you don't really own it. So that combination of sort of streaming and sales is what's referred to as consumption.
Right.
Yeah, and I was just kind of doing some quick math, and I could be wrong, but it looks like 15,000 albums sold is about 23 million streams.
That's a scary number, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm curious, as you guys see the business evolving, like how much of the income are you counting on from the streaming side these days versus the physical side? I mean, your thing seems very focused on real music fans that probably do buy physical product. But
Look, retail and physical product is still a really important component for us. I will say more and more of our artists are starting to, be more reliant on streaming. And, when I first started at the company, there were some artists who refused to put their music on streaming services. I feel like that's probably changed, although I can't swear to it. But certainly in the industry at large, and in certain musical genres that were a little slower to come to streaming, country music at one point was, that audience was not a streaming audience. That's really changed, and country music has come into the mainstream. So there's always like this is kind of a moving target and an evolutionary process. So I can't really say with all certainty what those percentages of streaming versus sales we rely on. We also have a really diverse roster from a genre standpoint. We're certainly known in that Americana, singer-songwriter, and root space, but we have pop, we have rock, we have alternative, we have kind of very left of center, we have gospel, we have country, artists, and some very successful sort of regional artists as well. So it's really hard to make a generalization based on the kind of roster that we have, and our roster is diverse by design. We want to be we want to have a broad range of artists. The one through line through all of that, and this also sort of answers that question, and then I'll stop and you can ask me more questions, but the one through line for us, not just sort of the sales potential or sales threshold, is the narrative of the artist. We do really, at the heart of what we do, we want to believe in the artists and love their music and believe in their potential to grow their audiences, and believe in the music, because we're going to be the champions to try to get that music out to the people. So the narrative of our artists is really important. And if we feel that we can help tell that story, tell the artist story, that we can help share their narrative and in a way that's going to be respectful and help them advance their careers, that's certainly a point of entry for us as well.
Wow.
And it's probably the reason why we will sign occasionally an artist that doesn't necessarily have a track record, but we really believe that they're gonna, that they're going to grow an audience, and we want to be part of that. So whether, I can't say how often we do that, but that's an important component of what we do as well.
But you have to be I'm sure, very calculated and very careful about when you do that, because you can't do that too often. I mean, you're also running a business. It's
Yes,
both.
exactly. So that's sort of those parameters for entry has, there's calculations involved in how we can keep our lights on and keep our staff employed, and also, being able to provide services. So without the ability to do that, we're not a company. So that,
I want to just, I hope I can ask you one last question, Lee. I want to just say to the group, we do need to have a hard stop at 3:20. But before we end, I want to make sure everybody is aware of Jayme and I's course, Compose Your Career. We get deeper into this stuff. We offer some free consults that people can connect with us and just, hang out. See if the course would be a good fit for you to go deeper into this kind of stuff. And we actually have a few APAP sponsored scholarships that are full scholarships that you could be a candidate for. So if that's something that you might be interested in, please just reach out to us I'm going to put, Jayme, do you mind putting the link there? There it is already. Read my mind. So that's composeyourcareer.org. And we follow up with us anytime with emails, and we will get right back to you and look forward to hearing from you. We love serving this community. And before we say goodbye to Lee, we got 5 minutes left. I just want to ask a big picture question to Lee. Working at the label and putting out lots of records, and I know you got a lot of projects coming up. What would you say is the biggest challenge you're facing in the current music industry, and like how does 30 Tigers sort of plan to navigate that going into the future?
Wow, that's such a great and loaded question. I think our challenges are the same as everybody's challenges. How do we serve our artists best? How do we help tell our artists stories, and how do we help sell their records given a constantly changing landscape where, some of the drivers of the old school music business led to sort of calculable results. There was a time where you'd promote a record to radio and that would sell the record, and that would help build an audience. There isn't a dedicated audience for anything anymore. Radio has definitely diminished in terms of its reach. I have kids, they don't listen to the radio. It annoys them. They are looking at other more direct ways of having relationships with artists. So I think the challenges for us are, how do we continue to grow our business and to be of great service to our artists, and to be able to still continue to cast as wide a net artistically as we do, to be an inclusive kind of a company that really helps our artists tell those great stories. And I think we've been very successful at doing that. But I think every day that the music industry kind of fragments, and that there are distractions in the media that take away from people's time and bandwidth to listen to music, those are challenges. Those are real challenges. So I think one thing I can say, and I know we probably don't have time to answer I see a couple questions in the chat. I guess I want to say to artists who are kind of going out there doing this independently as a start, that becomes your calling card. If you have the ability to put music out on your own, I really encourage you to do that, because all companies, mine and others, are looking at the landscape of this independent world, and the ability that technology has given artists to do everything without the music industry. If you're able to, I think that's a great way to start, and that helps tell your story. It certainly helps bring eyeballs to your websites, to your tours, to anything you're doing, whether it's an independent label, whether it's a services company, like mine or the many others out there, or whether it's a major label, if you have aspirations to kind of go big. And everyone, because technology has afforded independent artists the opportunity to do so much on their own, most of the industry kind of expects that a lot of that's going to get done as a starting point. So the entry points are different for different companies, but putting out music, even testing the water with singles, with an EP, I would say don't be afraid to do that on your own, because that helps tell your story. And then people in my position, people at other companies are going to see you out there, or going to run into you at a festival, or get word of a really cool artist because of a mutual relationship, or contact in the business. That's how we find artists, and that's my job, and that's people who do what I do. That's our job, is to go out there and find you. And if you're doing it on your own, one, you're probably collecting a good amount of that money on your own, which is great because you're learning how to build your own business. But two, that's a means to getting to people at the next level. And I think that there's a good value in doing that for yourself and for whatever your aspirations are going forward.
That's great advice. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you for your time. And we want to thank APAP again for hosting today. It's been awesome. And again, I know we didn't get to every question or get to do everything we wanted to do today, because this time flies by. But we really, really appreciate everybody's time and appreciate you joining us. Please stay in touch, and we'll see you at the next one. I think we have another offering coming up this season, so we'll be in touch about that, okay?
Thank you all.
For coming
Thank you,
out this
everyone.
afternoon.
Thanks for having
Appreciate
me.
y'all.
Good
Thanks
luck,
so
everyone
much.
out there. Bye.